Hi, this is Erica with the Flourish Forum, and today we're going to learn capitals, also known as majuscules. You want to make sure you have good control over the pen before starting working on capital letters, because capitals are freer, but yet take more control to learn than minuscules. So as long as you have a good amount of control over the pressure you apply to the letters and the speed at which you work, then you're ready to get started. A few things: capitals are equal in height to the x height plus the ascender, so the same height as lowercase b, h, k, and l. You also might want to try practicing in pencil first before going to the pen so that you get the feel of the letters and the shapes. You can also do press and release with a pencil, so that's a fun way to practice. And while you want to practice the basic strokes, sometimes it's difficult to understand the strokes out of the context and rhythm of the letter. So practice the letters first to see how they work, and then go ahead and go back and practice the basic strokes. So let's get started. The basic strokes start with a basic downstroke, and the basic downstroke is also called a swelled stroke because it both starts and ends without pressure and then swells or has pressure in the middle, as you can see here. It's on the 55-degree angle, except for this one, which is called the nearly vertical swelled stroke, which is almost straight up and down. The basic downstrokes have what's called a finishing stroke, which can take a huge variety of forms. This one is just a slight little ellipse where you go back on the line, or a ball or circle finish. This one is called the swirl finishing stroke, and you want to finish the swirl on an up stroke. And this is an oval flourish, which I'm showing you but we're not going to work with for some time. We're going to stick with some basic capitals, which are difficult enough on their own. There's also a basic upstroke, which I'm going to show you in slow motion here. I like to put a little bit of pressure when I first start. It just makes the beginning of the letter look a little bit more finished. I'm going to show you a very basic capital A, which uses this upstroke. It's a little bit tricky to master outside of the context of the letter. This one is called the lead-in stroke, and this is a spiral, which you can start with just an oval or do the full spiral. Again, there's so many different kinds of lead-in strokes, but I'm going to show you just a few. This is called the loop lead-in stroke. You want to try and maintain as much oval form as you can here, and the initial stroke plus the second half of that oval should be parallel to each other. The pressure and release lead-in is much like when you practice pressure and release with lowercase. You want to go a little bit over right there so that you have a smooth transition into the capital. This is called the horizontal curve. Very tricky to do outside the context of the letter, but this is how you'd start the capital C or the capital E. Very little pressure on that stroke. And then this is the double curve, which has no pressure, just a curve up and then down, very similar to the crossbar of the capital F. And the last basic stroke is the O form, which is exactly the same as the minuscule O form, except it goes all the way to the top line. Again, the trick with this stroke is getting those two lines to match up without overlapping. So we're going to get started with our capital letters. Capitals can be written much larger for dramatic or decorative effect, but we're going to stick with the basics here until we get comfortable with them. So the first is this really basic capital A, which starts with the simple basic upstroke and then a curve over, or you can do a full loop over, such as that. A little bit fancier A, using a basic finishing stroke here with just a small circle or ball finish, and then come down with a pressure stroke and then loop around. It does take a bit of practice to get that loop to be a nice oval. And the next A is just a little bit fancier, which has a spiral finishing stroke or a swirl finishing stroke, and then comes up, and instead of looping around, it just has a crossbar. You want to make sure you do your crossbar after you've finished lettering the complete word, so finish your words here, letters here, and then go back and do your crossbar so that they don't bump into each other. The letter B comes down, the basic downstroke. I'm going to do a slight ellipse finishing stroke. And this I'm going to do an oval lead-in stroke. You really want to try and make those curves as smooth and oval shaped as possible. The bottom oval is a little bit flat there. And this is a ball finishing stroke. And again, that oval, come in, almost like making a Z, and then come up for the finish. And this one's a little bit fancier. Spiral finishing stroke. And then we're going to do a loop, lead-in stroke, and then the rest of the curves. The C, we're starting with that horizontal curve, and then we're coming around. You're maintaining an oval shape here, so if you were to finish this off, you would see that is really just our O form. Really tricky letter to do. It looks easy, but it's not. It takes a lot of practice to get the right angle, and also to get the size of both the top and lower loop the right size. They want to be about equal. The bottom one can be a little bit smaller or bigger depending on your preference, but they want to be about equal. The D is without a doubt one of the hardest capitals in the alphabet. You come around. This one is a single stroke, very, very light pressure there, and come around. The lighter you can give the pressure coming up over the top of that D, the less chance you have of wiggly lines. Or you can do it in two strokes. Like here, I'm stopping, and I'm going in with a loop lead in, and then connecting the bottom. Makes it a little bit tricky. So now we're going to work a little bit on spacing and connecting. So unlike the lowercase letters, you always want to work with a word with practicing capitals, so both the capitals and the minuscules at the same time. So we need to work on spacing and connecting those letters. The first letter or name is Art, and I'm going to make an A, and then this one loops around and connects to the next letter in the word. You want to kind of gauge ahead whether you can connect your letter to your capital. Some people don't like to connect any of them, and some people, like to connect some of them. The ones that flow nicely and make sense to connect, you can. For example, this one here, this is going to use a crossbar, so we do our crossbar last. It's a little bit higher than I would like, but I didn't want to bump into those letters. That's the reason that you do it after you do your minuscules. And again, that very simple capital A, and this one does not connect to the next letter. You want to leave just a little bit of space there. It's a little subjective in terms of how much space you leave. You want to give enough room for your letters to breathe, not to look too squished, but you don't want to leave too much room that it looks like there's a gap there, or you're not sure if they actually go together as a word. This name is Barb, and the B usually does not connect to the next letter. However, there is a variation where that loop continues forward and you can connect it, but we're not going to learn it just yet. So you just leave a little bit of space there for your next letter. C's very rarely connect to the next letter. And you want to try with the next letter in the word to just slightly mirror that curve of the C, so there isn't a big disconnect there. They're almost parallel to each other, not quite, but they slightly mirror each other. I find C's very difficult. It just takes a lot of practice. And again, you can make your C so that it comes all the way down and crosses over the bottom part of the oval. And in some cases, if you're doing a very flourished C, you could make it connect there, but for the most part you won't. There's a lot of leeway here in terms of connecting or not connecting. With a capital D, they almost never connect, again, unless you're doing something really flourished where it would come back through the letter. You just want to leave enough room, enough breathing room for that letter to not look squished. D's take a lot of practice in terms of trying to get that second part of the letter to look the right shape, to not be wiggly, and also to be almost parallel with the initial downstroke. Here I'm going to do it in the two-part stroke. I find this a little bit easier, except for trying to connect at the bottom. And I find sometimes at the top it makes my capital look a little bit narrowed out. But again, there's no connecting line here, just a little bit of a space. So I'm going to leave you with that. Have fun practicing these letters. Next up, we'll be learning E, F, G, and H. Hope to see you on the forum. Thanks.